What's the sentiment? Why systemic disease is on the rise? Welcome to Sentiment Sessions, the podcast. And today I want to welcome back three special guests. Dr. Edgar Everett,
Hello.
Dr. Vanita Govan, and Dr. Ursula Thatch. I want to welcome you back. We had a great conversation prior, talking about other conditions that are facing the broken healthcare system and specifically the African American community. But today I want to talk to you about the systemic diseases that are currently on the rise. We all know that cancer rates are rising, but I want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing around systemic disease. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now, Dr. Edgar?
I think the overall numbers is the biggest issue, right? Is if you see a rise in overall numbers of all the conditions that we're suffering from, then the question has to be asked, is there a common reason for all of that? I think that's something that really needs to be examined.
Okay. How about you, Dr. Thatch?
Certainly the numbers are rising. Even, I think, for instance, obesity is a systemic disease now that's on the rise. And again, since 1985, less than, most states reported less than 10% of an obesity rate. But by 2016, there were only maybe 3 states in the United States that reported an obesity rate of less than 25%. So again, the rising numbers and significantly over a short period of time in, 30 years. And what's the reason for that?
Yes, and what are your thoughts in terms of the reasons behind obesity? Dr. Govan, do you want to shed any light?
It goes back to the broken healthcare system and what we're feeding ourselves in food and being on medication for life. So the numbers are not going to ever go down if we continue to treat the symptoms with medication and continue to eat the same foods. It's like insanity, expecting something to change, and we're doing the same thing over and over. So the numbers are going to continue to increase.
Wow.
And I think we're seeing like a supercharge, right, of a overall model that has never really been paid close attention to, right? I think we've never really paid great attention to the things that we eat and the things that we consume, but I think that we're in a state now where things are at a different rate, right? I was in Florida with my cousin, and at the time he was 12 years old, and I'm like, dude, you've been playing video games all day long. Like, what do you go outside? And you know what? He just turned around and looked at me. He said, there ain't no other kids outside. And that's the truth.
Exactly.
Right? Is that the life experience is different today than it was 30 or 40 years ago, right? With the same bad food, with the same bad habits, with the same issues, but the life experience is different, right? Kids don't have to go outside to play in order to communicate with each other anymore. We're less connected, we're less active, we're less focused on the things that are healthy for us, both physically and mentally. All of those things combined with terrible food and increased amount of medications and the air that we breathe getting worse and the water that we drink getting worse. And so things are supercharged. And so what you find is when you get this toxic soup of habits and mentality, plus the things that we consume, and it's just making us ill, everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. What role did COVID play on this? I have to go back to, a point you just made around, no one has to be together anymore. They can just get online and start to play video games or do some type of social media, together, but not necessarily getting together in person. It's amazing because post-COVID, you see a lot of people come out and they're like totally different now. Like, where were you hiding at, And so, did Dr. Thatch, did you see COVID play or factor into what you consider to be this rise and uptick in systemic disease?
Yes, because we became even more isolated.
Yeah.
And I think Dr. Vanita could probably speak more to the mental health aspect of it, but people are lonely. And one of the things that they have found that seems to contribute to significantly to your health and wellness and well-being is community.
Exactly.
And when we isolated ourselves, we lost that sense of community.
Yeah.
And that's a good factor that we had that was playing into it that is now gone, but yet all these other things are still in the mix.
Exactly. And Dr. Govind, what do you think about it from an IO perspective?
Well, when we think about the long-term impact of COVID, we have shifted our behaviors even in the workplace.
Yes.
We don't have to show up. We know we can do our job at home now. So that community, the need to empower each other in person has kind of disintegrated, unfortunately. But we do need community in order to be effective and survive with each other. So it's almost, I'm in this alone.
Yeah.
And you're really not, but we haven't gotten back to getting ourselves together with family, with friends, with colleagues in the workplace. We are learning how to survive through isolation.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Exactly.
I think the miscalculation. I think we miscalculated the trade-off, right? In keeping ourselves safe from COVID and what we gave up in order to keep ourselves safe. I think we miscalculated the trade-off, and that it's okay to kind of give all this stuff up for the sake of this thing that's going on, and that thing that was going on was important, but I think we just did not give enough weight and enough attention to the things that we gave up, right? So we haven't transitioned back like we should, and I think that has really caused a lot of problems. When I got interviewed for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the topic of the interview was about children, right, and how it would affect them. And the question she asked was, during COVID, during and after COVID, what is the one thing that you feel like kids will be missing the most, right? What's the most important thing, and what are the things you're most worried about with COVID? And I think the expectation of my answer was staying safe from the virus and things like that, but that wasn't my answer. My answer was the mental health aspect and how it was going to affect children is the thing that I'm most worried about. I'm less worried about COVID than I am worried about the mental effects when it comes to kids.
Exactly.
And by the way, people lit me up online when I said that. They were very, very upset when I said that. Yeah. But when you look at that trade-off, I think that people weren't paying much attention to that, and now we're beginning to see those effects of of not going to school for 2 years and kids learning to socialize and how they've been behind from an education standpoint and what that can do to your mental health and all of these effects that the way we reacted to COVID has had on us as a society.
Absolutely. I think especially, and this is unfortunate, in the Black community, we don't focus on the mental health aspects of who we are, right? Because that isolation, to the point of being isolated, not necessarily showing up and being engaged in the office environment, it plays a part on your psyche. One of the things that I talk about in my podcast is that you get what you think about. So if you're down, if you're out, and then you just put that emotion behind it, right? And you're feeling a certain type of way, those feelings then internalize and manifest into specific issues in the body, right? So, I'm not the subject matter expert on it all, but I know from my own experience of getting sick because of isolation, because of perception, because of not having those connections, right? And that could play a big role in health. So talk to me, Dr. Govind, around what do you think are are you seeing more demographics worse off than others? I guess that goes without saying, but just wanted to get your expert feedback on that.
Absolutely. If Johnny couldn't read before COVID, Johnny still can't read. And so we're not addressing that.
Yeah.
We are academically behind in so many of our school districts that where the communities are underserved. Mm-hmm. So how do we even get back on track where teachers want to even come back to school to teach. It's more difficult now than it has ever been to teach our children, because they've always been behind the 8 ball, and they're further behind now.
Gotcha.
So that's a challenge in our community.
Yeah.
And this is definitely going to have a long-term impact on higher education and the community as a whole.
Exactly. That education around how to care for oneself, the preventative. What I always like to talk about preventative measures, right? How do you get in front of these things? What do you see, Dr. Thatcher, some preventative measures that we could take to kind of just, get away from this, or at least start to reduce the systemic disease, or at least stifle it, if you will? I'm not sure how we approach it, but what are your thoughts on some of the things that can be done?
Well, I think certainly because we are now at least feeling more comfortable with being back out in public and society. I mean, I think about, in COVID, and I sometimes flash back to that whole idea. We were even kept away from church. Church was a big community for a lot of us. And some people, that was the only community that they had. And you were isolated from church. Now, a lot of churches like my congregation pivoted and figured out the Zoom thing and, online Bible study, but there's something about being in the physical presence of people.
Yes, connection.
To have that connection, to have that support, to have that interaction. And I think that was huge for people. And a lot of times that may be your only support.
Exactly.
That may be the only place, you come to church, that's the only person that I'm going to ever have any physical contact with. And I like coming to church on Sunday because I'm going to get a hug today. I know somebody's going to say something encouraging to me, and I'm going to at least get a hug today.
Exactly.
And that's therapeutic.
Absolutely.
That connection, that contact. Right.
And I think we underestimate the connection between our mental health and our physical health.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very underestimated, right?
Oh, yes.
And when it's also very obvious, right? Your mental state and your mental condition can have a direct reflection on how you take care of yourself.
Exactly.
And then how you take care of yourself, obviously, is going to determine your outcomes, right? Your health outcomes. And so when you mess up something in that equation, then you're going to get bad outcomes. And I think that that's one of the things that really has to be addressed when we talk about these systemic conditions, right? Many of these conditions are conditions that happen over time under consistently bad conditions, right? And a bad environment.
Stressful
and so if it's happening over time under consistent bad environment, then what's causing that, right?
Exactly.
And why do we stay in it? And all of those things. So I think addressing it from a mental health standpoint and us really paying attention to that will definitely have some effect when it comes to our actual physical health.
Yeah, awesome.
And we are subject matter experts on our own health.
Yes.
Exactly.
We know what's wrong with us.
Exactly. A lot of times we do go to healthcare institutions to kind of validate or substantiate what we're feeling, right?
Or to let us off the hook.
Oh, yes, to go back to some bad behaviors, maybe eating, maybe lack of exercise, maybe stressful environments. What role does healthcare play in this? I mean, do we charge our healthcare system to come up with these solutions, or are we now just accept the status quo and just go along with the flow and figure things out for ourselves? Or do you see this as a combination of our collaboration effort? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. I think, again, a combination of all of these things. Like Dr. Thatcher mentioned before, is both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
It's the healthcare side of it, but it's also us on this side of it. And I like to really pay a lot of attention to personal responsibility as a part of this equation, right? It's not the only factor, but it is a really important part of this entire equation is your personal responsibility, the decisions that you make and the actions that you take.
So talk a little bit, expound on that a little bit, Doctor, because, a lot of people don't know what that accountability looks like for themselves. They hear the word personal responsibility and it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to do the right thing. So what are some of the actions that people should be looking or thinking about in terms of taking that personal responsibility?
I think one is information, right? And information, and then what you do with the information. And then, like we were saying before, then understanding if you have the information, why you aren't doing the things that you need to do. And that's where the mental health aspect really comes into. And that's why I think it's such an important piece to all of this, is because we all have doctors and we all have Google. So access to the information is not necessarily an issue for us anymore.
Exactly.
Right? Being able to get out and consume the information is sometimes difficult, right? And finding and from that aspect. But once you get that information, what we're doing with it, I just think it's this sliver right in the middle that's just not really paid attention to, because we're giving the information, right? And then we know the actions that we're supposed to take, but we're not figuring out why those two aren't coming together.
And that's a great point, because we are living in a society right now where people are way more knowledgeable, right? Their information is right at your fingertips, to your point.
Oh, yeah.
And they have it, they know it, they can speak about it, but we're not seeing that application and execution on how this is going to work for me. What do you think are some of the roadblocks to what's keeping people from executing or applying it to? What are your thoughts?
Habits.
We
become creatures of habit, and it takes time to shift that behavior into something more positive, unless we absolutely have to. You know, I'm going to keep going down this street as long as they tell me as long as they don't tell me I can't, until they put a wall up. I can't go down that street anymore.
Exactly.
So we will continuously do things that hurt us if we don't see the hurt quickly. You know,
that's a good point.
We just keep trudging down the same road. It's that insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different outcomes, and it's just not going to happen until something breaks.
Until you end up in the doctor's office or in the hospital, or God forbid, you're gone.
Right.
You know, until it's just too late. You know, and I'm seeing that in people I've known over the years, or family members, where they've know better, but they're waiting for something to hit them over the head, or, you know, like, oh, it's not bothering me now. I know it's not good for me, but then once it's bothering you, it's almost too late, you know. Yeah.
I think also going back to the healthcare system and the mindset of the healthcare system that has gotten us to that point that we're not taking responsibility for our own health and care. Excuse me. It's sort of like that mindset of, I'm the physician, you're the patient, I'm sick. You, doctor, should fix me.
Fix me. Yep.
Fix me. And oh, by the way, I don't have to be held accountable to anything that I'm doing. And I think we have let people off the hook with that, because that's the mindset.
Exactly.
And people, you talk about information, there's a lot of information out there. Much of it, I think there's a concern for wrong and lacking information, but when you actually have somebody that you come in to talk to as your provider, and they don't kind of let you off the hook or give you that guidance and direction that you need to get on the right track, it's just not going to happen.
Or doctors having those conversations with their patients to say, you're accountable. I only can do so much. I'm not God here. You know, I can't heal you. I can do what's in my control, but you have to supplement this. You have to make a shift. I mean, it's almost like sometimes we need people to just scare us to death, right? Should doctors be charged with scaring folks to death? It's shocking them into.
I mean, tell them the truth.
Yeah, tell them the truth,
yes,
right?
And you know what? I think I kind of chuckle, because when I talk to new clients coming into my office, I talk about integrity. And I said, excuse me, this is a reciprocal relationship.
Right.
And I said, this is that office you're going to come to hear what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And if that's not what you're looking for, then I'm not your person, and I'm probably not going to be a good fit, because, you know, you're not going to come in and be doing something that I know is detrimental to your health and well-being, and just sit there and continue to let you do it.
Exactly.
And sign off on it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I deal with the same thing every single day. Is, you know, people will tell me they're still having this problem, and I always sit down with them and talk to them about the things that they are doing, and remind them at the very beginning, we said that this is a partnership. And there's some things that are important for me to do, but there's also some things that are important for you to do. You're only with me 15 minutes. You're with yourself the rest of the day.
Exactly.
So which do you think is going to have a bigger impact on your health?
Exactly.
And I remind them of that. Or have you been doing the exercises or the food or the therapy or all the things that you were supposed to be doing in order for us to get these outcomes? And when they say, well, no, I really haven't been doing those things, you're right? Because we have to walk them through that, repeatedly, because like you said, it's habits and things like that, and remind them that you didn't come here for me to fix you. You came here for us to fix you.
Right.
And when they understand that, then, it really puts their doctor in the proper place, because we're not God. We're not all knowing. We can't solve every problem by sprinkling dust on you. This is not the way it works, right? It's not the way it works. It really is work and it really is effort, but it takes both.
Absolutely. Are you seeing any other common misconceptions or myths around systemic disease in terms of perceptions? We talked a little bit about, people thinking that they have the time. Like, I got time. Nothing's showing up, or I'm not feeling any type of way. A lot of times systemic disease lies dormant and it's just growing. And by the time it does become noticeable, it could be too late. Anything around some of the myths that you all see in your practice or in your conversations?
I think one of the things that disturbs me is that people will want to write it off to genetics.
That's the one I was going to say.
It's like,
That's the one I was going to say.
Everybody in my family has diabetes. I'm going to get diabetes. So, why deprive myself of whatever I want to enjoy in life? And, in taking that a step further, 3 of my brothers and 2 of my sisters have ended up on dialysis, and probably as a result directly of the diabetes. And, this is going to be my fate, and I accept that. And so one of the things that I like to tell people a lot is, lifestyle trumps genetics.
Absolutely.
Just because Aunt so-and-so and uncle and mom and big mom and whoever ended up with this, you have the opportunity to change, the path that you end up on based on some other decisions, better decisions that you can make based on better knowledge and information.
Absolutely.
But no reason and no need for me to even try because I'm getting it anyway. And also that negative mindset, just putting that negativity out to the universe. It's like you keep putting that out.
You set it in place.
You actually speaking it.
Yes.
Right. That's the whole thinking
Absolutely.
and getting what you talk about, what you think about. And you make a very valid point because, I hear people saying, well, hey, my dad was an alcoholic. My uncle, my grandmother was so it's in me to just drink. It's like, no, you don't have to drink. My great grandmother, my grandmother, my aunt, they all died of colon cancer and pancreatitis. I can't remember the exact. Pancreatitis. Those cancers, and I was like, oh, no way. I don't have to accept this, right? So introduce hydrocolonic therapy as a means of trying to eliminate some of the toxins and things and keep the colon clean is one of the things I practice in the spa. So again, saying no, challenging the status quo to what we think and perceive is our fate because family has suffered or we've lost family members to certain diseases, systemic diseases. So
I think that that's one of the things to understand is that, your genetic code can make you predisposed to some things.
Yeah.
Right? Sugar may affect me in a different way than it may affect you.
Exactly.
Right? Fattier foods may affect me in a different way than it may affect you. Those things are important to recognize.
Exactly.
But what it tells you is that where your work needs to be done. Right? It's really what your genetic code can tell you is that I may have to work a little bit harder and be a little bit more mindful about the sugars that I consume than maybe somebody else because their body processes it at a different rate or in a different way. Those things are things that we can recognize, right? That if you see obesity throughout your family, then that's something your family may be predisposed to. But all of your family eat the same way, and none of them exercise, and none of them take care of themselves the way that they're supposed to. So it triggers those things in your genetics in order for you to gain weight at a higher rate than maybe your best friend who's skinny.
Exactly.
Right? And understanding that the things that you do, your environment really triggers your genetic code. You know, it's getting a really, really good understanding of that, because a lot of times you hear people say things like, well, it don't matter, right? It doesn't matter because, you know, everybody in my family suffer from this condition, so it don't matter.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that is, you know, you've given up, right? You've given up on something that
no hope
is not a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think when we perpetuate that.
Exactly.
We perpetuate that, and we support it in a lot of ways. I think, specifically for us as African Americans, we champion bad health.
Yeah.
In ways that we don't even know that we're doing it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You know, in ways that we don't even understand that we're doing it, by the food that we eat, by the body compositions that we celebrate, by the lack of mental health, by all of these things, we're supporting and really propping up bad health.
Exactly.
More than we are our good health. You know, you too skinny, you need to eat some more.
Exactly.
Right? We're the only ones who say that, by the way.
Absolutely. And then we live in an environment to where, you know, if we call out obesity, then it's fat shaming. If we call out bad, you know, diet habits and things like that, then it's all about the delivery.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, sometimes the delivery, do we need to challenge the status quo on our delivery with respect to how if clients are coming to see you, do we take the traditional approach that we've been taking and saying, oh, it's going to be okay, and are they really listening, or are we really listening? Because I'm going to tell you, it's usually when somebody calls me fat that I go, oh hell no, I'm going to go lose it. But if somebody says, oh, well, you might want to consider, losing a few pounds, it hits differently. I mean, I'm not telling people to go out here and be negative Nelly or be, the evil doctors, but should we reconsider our approach in our delivery to educate and inform, not just ourselves, but within our communities and our families?
I think when I'm talking to people, and again, you have to understand that my practice now, people are seeking me out for specific things and to become healthier, to get off of medication, to improve their life in general and their overall well-being. So, I think I use a lot of different ways to explain things to them, to try to shift that mindset out of where they've been in that allopathic mindset, because this is not that same place and space that we're going to operate in here. So like the genetic thing, I tell people, genetically, you get what you got, unless you're going to die and come back and get different parents. Your genetic makeup, and this is exactly what I say, your genetic makeup is what you have. But what makes the difference in the outcome, disease, systemic disease, cancers, whatever, seems to be the soil that you plant that seed in. And that's your lifestyle, that's your mindset, that's your mental health and well-being, that's your, lifestyle changes. And that you have control over. You don't have any control over this seed. And the thing, even with cancers, they believe that this soil can make the difference as to whether some of those bad genes will actually be turned on and activated. So it's not like you're stuck with something.
Exactly.
There's always a way to improve upon anything.
Exactly.
But you got to at least make the effort.
Exactly.
And I think that's important too, the way you said, because a lot of people will just push it off to genetics, or even in the medical community, right? They'll say, vitamins don't make that big of a difference, or the food that you eat doesn't make that big of a difference, right? If it's in your family. And I always push back by saying, okay, let's put science aside. Why are you arguing against someone eating healthy and taking vitamins? That is always my question, right? What is your valid argument against someone living a healthy lifestyle, right? So what you're saying is that it is fine for them to live a bad lifestyle because of their genetics, and you're supporting that because of their genetics. And I'm saying, what's the harm, or like what's the downside to telling someone to eat healthy and live a healthier lifestyle, right? And that's a very challenging question for many people in the medical community. It's a very challenging question, which I don't really understand why it's so challenging, but it is, right? And I'm sorry.
Honestly, I don't even. I'm kind of chuckling over here because I don't even understand how we got to that point. How did we get here? It's like one of my big things that I talk to folks about is GI doctors. There are a lot of gut issues now. Tons of, you know this, you talked about it in your business in hydrocolonic. Gut issues. Your gut, I explained, is one of the biggest organs in your body. If your gut is all messed up, then that's going to cause you systemic everything to be off.
Exactly.
Yet I have had multiple people come from multiple different GI doctors and having been told, well, your diet doesn't have anything to do with your gut dysbiosis, right? Your ulcerative colitis, your IBS, your Crohn's, whatever they're going to call it, your inflammatory. How can you say that?
It's amazing.
It's literally the only thing.
It's
it's like,
that
no,
disease starts in the gut. It starts.
I mean, when I hear that, you made that gesture, it's like, I'd say sometimes I want to poke myself in the eye with a sharp pencil. It's like, how can you come from a doctor who's looking at your digestive system and then not talk about the fact that what you're digesting may be impacting the disease disorder that you're dealing with?
Exactly.
You talk about this insanity.
It's the pharmaceuticals. I mean,
And, that's the other solution. Here, just take this medication. And but the medication will work as long as you're taking it. But who knows the side effects of most of these steroid-based drugs that they're prescribing.
Exactly.
And once you stop taking them, what happens? Your gut problems come right back.
Yep.
They come right back. But what is even sadder is people who have made that shift on their own. I've also seen this. They've looked into, they've studied, they've determined that, gluten doesn't work for me and I need to cut out sugar and processed things don't work. And yet they'll go in to a GI doctor and they'll say, well, none of that really matters. And, I'm not even going to discuss that with you until you take this medication.
Discourage it.
Discouragement.
Exactly.
How do you discourage people who have already decided this is what I'm going to try to do? They're not even trying to acknowledge that these people are doing the right thing.
Exactly.
That in my opinion is just...
It's malpractice.
I was not going to say that because we don't like to talk about that. In my opinion,
it lacks integrity.
For sure. That's a nice way. That's a very nice way of putting it.
And the reason behind it goes back to bottom line.
And that's the easiest thing. The doctors are not being paid to sit down. It's going to take you some time to discuss nutrition with somebody and how to eat better, change or eliminate things out of your diet. How long does it take for you to write a prescription? Click the button and it's in the system and the patient's gone on.
Exactly.
And you're on to the next. It's just a much heavier lift to be on this side of healthcare. To be on the wellness side of healthcare is a much heavier lift, and most people just don't want to do it. They're not that invested in what it is they do for a living or the career that they chose in order to be interested in nutrition, in order to be interested in lifestyle when they can just write a prescription. And when you're on this side when you're on the solution-based side of healthcare, it's a lot more work to it, right? Yeah. You have to be a high-level communicator. You have to know what you're talking about and be knowledgeable. You have to constantly be learning. You have to care, which is an energy drain in itself. So there's a lot of work and a lot of energy that's put into being on this side of healthcare that many people just they don't want to invest in. And I think on the patient side of things, a patient being able to recognize that fact, right, about who is really invested in you getting better, and has made the conscious decision to be on a solution-based side of healthcare and really looking for those doctors.
Awesome.
I think you brought up an excellent point. And I often will say, I've been board certified in allopathic medicine since 1995. That's a long time ago. Since I have moved to the other side, the solution base, I feel like I am in medical school and residency all over again, because the wealth of knowledge that is out there is unbelievable. And the thing I think I'm critical of in traditional medicine, and I say often, I can talk about them because I'm still a card-carrying member, I'm still kind of in the club, is that we are not open to anything new. And we, you know, it's like, well, we've been doing this way all the time, although the definition of insanity is not working. We'll just continue to do that. But if something different, perhaps more positive, presents to them, they're not even willing to recognize it as being something worth looking into.
Exactly.
That's the sad part about it. And that's why the more work, but you're also fighting not only the system, and you have, I'm sure, patients that still see their allopathic physicians. And it's like you're telling them one thing, but then, you know, they got the University Hospital Department of Internal Medicine or whatever that's telling them something completely opposite of what you're saying most of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough when, you know, when their doctor is also the doctor for the Cardinals.
Right.
And you hear things like that, right? That these, you know, these badges or these titles, right, that come behind their name that you know, that really do impress people, and give them the impression that person knows what they're talking about in every area.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
and
good
I think
to
that's
have
where
that credibility, but at the same time, does not equate to that you're expert or you're knowledgeable about everything. So yeah.
And the root word is system.
System.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, a lot of times you'll see articles that'll come out and it'll say research study shows that this might be bad for you, right? And I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Everybody in wellness has been saying that's bad for you for 100 years.
Now it might be.
Right. Now research studies show that aspartame might be bad for you.
Oh,
right?
wow. Creative language.
Exactly, that it might be bad for you. But then right after that article, what happens is 100 articles that tell you that aspartame is not so bad for you. Right? And when we know that specifically talking about that, it's a neurotoxin, right? And it causes all these problems and all these issues, and it's directly connected to many systemic conditions. And even the way it came about is like the craziest story with talking about the FDA and all that stuff. Even the way, you know, sweeteners came about is like the craziest story, but it points to this system problem that we have, because, you know, sweetener was denied by the FDA dozens and dozens of times. And long story short, the administration changed in 1980, and all of a sudden the FDA approves it, right? Because different people are in different positions.
It's amazing how it is, because when I look at it for the agriculture firm that I work for, you know, the different countries that or certain products that we have in the United States are banned in other countries. They take their healthcare very seriously, and they will label it as such. This is toxic. This is a killer. This is not good for you. Here we play on the fence with it. We're like, oh, I think it might be. It may not. They've erased the history behind it, right?
In other countries, they're doing a different math, though. Like, they know if more people get sick, it costs them more money.
Exactly.
In our country, they know if more people get sick, we make more money.
Exactly.
So they're doing it's a different math.
Do you think that's attributed to the fact that they have healthcare systems that are in place by the government versus here we're still trying to figure out ours? And you get what I'm saying? So they know that it'll be a bigger burden on the cost for them to accept these toxins versus in the United States, it's just a free-for-all, right? You know, they're not really heavy lifting. They put a cap on the care that they will provide, but most of the care is still, the doctors or, you know, private practices and healthcare systems are still footing the bill on.
One thing I want to chime in on with from what Dr. Everett mentioned about research, and this is something I've learned in probably the last decade. You know, everybody talks about research has proven this and research has proven that. I'm learning that research can be designed to prove any
exactly
point that you want it to prove.
Exactly.
So you can design your study to say that X doesn't work or aspartame is good for you, and at the end of your study, you can come up with that conclusion based on what you did.
Exactly.
And it's like if we are basing everything that we do and how we perform on based on research, well, how valid is the research?
How valid is the risk? Because statistically proven analysis can be conducted in so many. We know this from our days. Statistics,
yeah,
right?
Statistics don't lie. People lie on statistics.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like that.
It's just amazing how you can come up with any outcome. And you can be very selective.
Yeah.
Be selective of that population, that
That's
sample
what he's saying.
size that you
Again,
get.
they're doing different math.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Different math. Being very
And in
creative.
pharmaceutical companies, the research is also part of the marketing budget.
Exactly.
By the way,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
it's the same budget.
Wow.
Because they understand how powerful it is for it to be in such and such journal.
Exactly.
That's just marketing for them.
What advice would you give our listeners who may be concerned about developing a systemic disease or may already have one? What recommendations would you give, Dr. Everett?
Understanding the impact of your habits would be the advice that I would give people. We know what healthy habits are, and we know and understand what healthy habits are. So at least getting yourself most of the way there is by just really working to practice those healthy habits. We know that we're supposed to exercise, right? We know that we're supposed to take care of ourselves mentally. We know that we're supposed to eat right. So starting from that point really puts you ahead of the game, and then layering with more information and experts and things like that. But really just starting with the things you know that you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. What about you, Dr. Govan?
I agree. It starts with your intellectual values. We know our bodies. We know who we are. We're subject matter experts on our own selves. Partner with your a physician or a care provider to make sure that you are in it with them. They're not in it by themselves. It's all about accountability.
I think in addition to knowing these 2 points, but also seeking out providers and people that will help you on your journey. Understanding that your answer likely is not going to come from the traditional healthcare system, and looking outside of the box is possibly something you need to take into consideration. Looking for doctors like these folks, myself, that are not in that system, but that's exactly what you're likely needing because you've been on that path of, sickness. Now it's time to try something else.
Awesome. This has been very good, rich information that you all have shared today. I really appreciate you all being on the show today. And I'm hearing it all starts with self. Thinking for ourselves, challenging the status quo, thinking outside of the box, getting informed, getting educated, and making that step to the change you want to happen and shape for your future. So thank you so much. Real quickly, Dr. Thatch, how can people get in touch with you?
My email address is biolifebalance@hotmail.com. My office phone is 314-862-5433.
Dr. Govan?
My email address is Venita, venita.govan, GOVAN, @gmail.com.
And Dr. Everett?
My practice is Proficient Chiropractic, and my email is proficientchiro@gmail.com, and the phone number is 314-447-0725.
Thank you so much again for your time today. Great conversation. And thank you all for joining this conversation, and I hope it was helpful. It starts with self. Thank you for joining Sentiment Sessions. And until next time, have a good one.